everybody, my name is Deb Mishra. I'm a faculty here in the School of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Oklahoma State University, and I'm also the graduate program coordinator. And this is spring break of 2024, and we are going to start a new series for our current as well as prospective graduate students. So we decided to start a series, and it's called Know Your Faculty. So the intention is to on a bi-weekly basis, hopefully meet with current faculty members in the department and ask them a set of questions to know a little bit about themselves, their research, their teaching interests, their background, some unique things about themselves, and also what advice do they have for our graduate students currently in our program, or maybe those who are hoping to join Oklahoma State very soon. To start off this series, I'm very fortunate to have our newest faculty member, Dr. Brian Giffin. So he's going to be our first interviewee in this series. So let's go and ask a set of questions to Dr. Giffin. Thank you. Hi Brian, welcome. Thank you very much for agreeing to be our first interviewee in this series. And let's get started. And what we will do is I will start a little bit of general questions about your background, and then we will see how the discussion goes. Okay?
Sure.
All right. So I guess the first question, please tell us a little bit about yourself. I guess where you're from, where you got your degrees and stuff like that, and when you joined OSU, and just so that our students can know you a little better.
Sure. Yeah, so I grew up in California, in Northern California, sort of near Sacramento. I also went to school there. I went to the University of California at Davis, got all my degrees there, bachelor's, master's, PhD. I just decided I was going to pick an institution and stay there, and that happened to be Davis. But it's an excellent institution. I did my bachelor's in civil engineering, master's in structural engineering and mechanics, and then PhD was focused on computational solid mechanics, which is very much focused on the numerical simulation of structures and their behavior under different loading conditions. Along the way, I did various other internships. As an undergraduate, I was an intern at the Structural Maintenance and Investigation Division at the California Department of Transportation. So I got to get out into the field and actually, crawl over a bunch of different bridges throughout California and do inspections and do a bunch of load ratings. So really, focused on the civil engineering applications. After that, as a graduate student, I was also an intern at Sandia National Labs in New Mexico for a couple different summers. There I did something a little bit different, not so much civil engineering anymore. It was much more general, focused on numerical simulation and, developing tools to enable engineers to solve more challenging problems. And that's where I really got an interest in pursuing more of a focused career in that area. That's why I decided to pursue a PhD ultimately. And then after I graduated PhD, I went to work at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory for about 5 years or so. Doing similar things, focusing on the development of these advanced numerical simulation tools. At Livermore, I was one of the lead developers on a software tool called Dyna3D, which has a lot of shared history with the commercial code LS-DYNA.
Yeah.
Very commonly used for things like crash and impact simulation and vehicle crash safety and things like that.
Okay.
So,
Great. And you joined OSU in this spring, right? January.
Yes, joined only just this past spring, so a couple months now.
Awesome. Okay. So, and what courses are you teaching this semester, and what are your plans? What courses do you plan on teaching and stuff?
This semester I'm teaching matrix analysis of structures.
Okay.
Next fall I'm going to be teaching advanced strength of materials. I think the semester after that I'll be doing a finite element class.
Oh, nice.
Which is something that I have, a lot of personal passion for and interest in.
And
then I think it won't be until maybe the fall of 2025 where I'll be teaching strength of materials undergraduate.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and going to research. So please tell a little bit about your area of research, like what generic area of civil you work in and stuff. And I would also appreciate if you can tell a little bit of when you are hiring graduate students to work with your group or in that topic, what kind of background would you be looking for, or what is oh yes, this student is capable to work in this area and stuff?
Well, I think, broadly speaking, my area of research is in structures, I guess you could say, is, the most broad category, but really more specifically, it's focused on solving problems that really can't be solved using anything other than, advanced computational simulation capabilities. So within that, I think even more specialized, I'm looking at simulating and modeling the behavior of structures under, extreme load conditions. That could be anything from natural hazards, like extreme wind loads or, earthquakes and things like that, to things like blast and impact loads, something that you'd hope the structure would never see in its lifetime, but we have to concern ourselves with these things in extreme cases. Okay. So really, it spans, the research that I would pursue spans the development of the tools and the improvement of the actual capabilities to model and simulate these phenomena, and actually applying those tools to then, understand how do these structures behave under these scenarios, how can we improve the design standards and the ability of these structures to withstand these things, or improve the hazard mitigation efforts to try to prevent them from becoming serious problems.
So do you take existing constitutive models and implement them, or do you also develop constitutive models as well?
It could be anything from, developing the actual simulation tools themselves, improving on the underlying methods, either some kind of finite element method. It could span, creating constitutive models to represent material behavior, spanning a pretty broad swath of things. I've done, pieces of research in each of these different areas, developing new constitutive models and things like that. But in general, the skill set is quite broad. You do have to have, if I were looking for a student to join that research group to do that work, it would involve, quite a bit of programming. So having some experience and background in programming, it could be something as simple as, just MATLAB or Python, or maybe a little bit more advanced, C++, ideally. But the student themselves would have to also have a good practical understanding of, the design standards of how does this actually, relate to real world problems, and what are the challenges in taking some real world problem or phenomena and translating that into a numerical setting. There's a lot of nuance and challenge associated with that process, and a lot of uncertainty as well. And so having an understanding of the limitations of the actual modeling software to be able to identify the gaps in knowledge and ability to model these things with high fidelity is kind of another critical area that I think you can't just be a computationalist, you can't just be, an experimentalist. I think you appreciate very well the value of straddling those two divides. But.
So, on a tangential question to what you just said, this programming skills, Python, MATLAB and stuff like that, sometimes we don't see civil engineering students focus a lot on that. But as you know, these days, it's all about data science, machine learning on one side of things, and, pure computational mechanics is all about programming and everything as well. So how did you develop those skills? Were you always interested in computer programming, or is that something you learned because you needed to, or how was that working?
I think it was mostly a self-taught process of gaining the actual skill set for programming. I think maybe to the credit of a lot of, computer science resources that exist. There's a lot of excellent, tutorials and things that you can find online that are readily available. And it's very easy to get up to speed on those things if you know where to look and if you're diligent about trying to develop that skill set. So I didn't really have any formal training in computer science until maybe graduate school. I took a couple of classes, but otherwise, it's mostly something that I think is the best thing to learn it is to do it. Learn by doing is really have a project that really requires you to use it and try to, develop the skill set in service of that.
Okay. So, before we end this first segment, I have a question that's, I want to know one funny thing about you. It can be either a funny experience, a unique experience, or a funny habit that you have or something.
Well, let's see. I think maybe one of the thing that seems to recur most frequently is, Commonly people will misspell my last name as Griffin instead of the correct spelling is Giffin without the R. But when misspelled my full name,
The Family Guy,
Brian Giffin, it coincides with the cartoon dog from
the Family Guy, right? Yeah. I actually remember that.
It's a common enough occurrence that every time somebody mispronounces it or misspells it, I get a little laugh out of it. So
that's good.
But
so it's Giffin, not Griffin, right?
Yes, you said it correctly.
Okay, all right, excellent. Okay, so we'll go to the next segment. It's called Career Path. Okay, so can you please tell us when did you realize that you want to do graduate studies and that too a PhD? Right, like after an undergrad, if the job market is good, I'm sure, civil engineering is always a field in demand. We are very fortunate at OSU. All our students get multiple offers before they graduate and stuff. So somebody who did his undergrad from this country, I would like to know, I'm sure you also had options. So what made you pick graduate school?
I think part of it was I had done a little bit of research. I participated in a bunch of different professional organizations as an undergraduate. And based on a lot of my interactions with people in those experiences, I'd said I wanted to become a structural engineer, a practicing structural engineer, get licensed and do a lot of design work. And my understanding was to do that, you kind of had to have a master's degree at a minimum.
Structures, yeah.
So setting that as my career goal really guided my educational experience and setting the educational goals of first pursue a master's degree. So that's really what got me in the door, was that original goal.
And then PhD?
And then from there, things changed a little bit. I gained more professional experience. I went to work, as I said, as an intern for a few summers, actually, at Sandia National Labs in Albuquerque. This is a fantastic place if you ever go to New Mexico. Really, excellent place to be. But also, the institution, Sandia, was filled with, researchers from many different disciplines, solving really challenging problems and using advanced, techniques and tools to be able to solve those problems. And my time there really informed then and reshaped what my career goals were. Everyone that I worked with there, they had PhDs, they were doing exciting research, and, that basically motivated me to pursue the same. So I came back to graduate school, completed my master's degree and then resolved to get a PhD in order to set myself up to be able to do something similar and ultimately to go and pursue a career at a national lab, which I did. And, later on now coming back to academia, that was sort of a different step, I think, but still on the same trajectory with similar goals of, doing exciting research using these advanced tools.
Yeah. So what I hear is that your experience with the internships and the research experience actually kind of helped you decide or guided your career path.
I don't think I would have made the same decisions had I not had that experience. I think it was incredibly valuable.
So it is okay if our students currently, when they wake up, they don't know if they want to be a faculty or they want to do it. It's okay because the career will ultimately guide them. They just have to, be good at what they're doing and stuff, right?
I think so. I think if you don't already have an internship experience, I think it's something that I highly recommend that students try to pursue and get a sense for whether this is something they want to pursue long term or whether they maybe need to adjust their career plan to maybe set themselves up to pursue a more specific thing in that discipline. I definitely think it's incredibly valuable.
Excellent. Okay. So, move on and what we're going to do in the last 1.5 segments basically as we end up is, this is more geared towards how you would advise a student. So, what we are interested in knowing is just your point of view, and we all know it doesn't have to agree with everybody. Everybody has their own point of view and stuff like that. So one question I would like to ask is, when an undergrad is coming out of school, one option is grad studies, of course, and you gave very good reasons why you decided. But sometimes also people get confused about the financial aspects as well. Like, an undergrad job is probably going to pay you what? I mean, after undergrad, a civil engineering job, maybe $60,000-$70,000 a year versus you're going to a $2,500 a month stipend, graduate school and stuff. Yes, there is a difference after the 2 years. Maybe there's a little salary difference or something like that. I don't know about the details. But how would you advise students to make a decision in that regard?
I think there's no one size fits all answer. I think you alluded to that, and quite well. Financial considerations maybe being one of the most significant. I feel fortunate enough that wasn't as much of a concern. But I think it's also unique in the engineering disciplines that commonly, if you're pursuing like a master's degree or a PhD, it's oftentimes funded for the entire duration, especially if you're coming into a project with a specific faculty member who has that project, with, funding allocated for students to pursue the work. In some cases, the financial aspect of paying your way through graduate school is less of a concern than certainly it was for undergraduate. Maybe you still have student loan debt to pay off, but I think you maybe defer payments until you complete your graduate education. So in some sense, you're deferring those concerns for a later date. In terms of, I think a natural concern for undergraduates is maybe if they graduate, they don't necessarily choose to go on immediately to pursue a master's or a PhD, that they're diminishing their chances of being able to come back or apply to a graduate school and be accepted. I think that's not entirely true. And in fact, I think in some ways, getting some industry experience can be a good thing, especially if it helps you to focus your perspective on what it is that you want to pursue and to select, what type of project and which advisor, do you actually want to work with. So I guess I would say if you do choose to go to the industry, it's not that you can't ever come back. I think if anything, if you are curious about pursuing like a master's or a PhD, look at that experience as a good opportunity to, see what would you want to focus on. Some of the most, I think, focused and disciplined students that I've seen come to graduate school were individuals who went and had some industry experience.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And so, I have to, say that if that's a concern for you, that maybe you're cutting yourself off from that further educational opportunity, nothing could be further from the truth, I think. Okay. But, always consider coming back, I think. That's,
Okay. That's good. Thank you. So the next question is an extension of that for the next stage. So now a student has finished master's. Now they're thinking if PhD is a way for them to go or not. And one thing I often get asked is, should I do PhD only if I'm interested in a faculty career, like an academic career? Or what is the role or importance of a PhD in the industry? Now you, for example, did work for the National Lab, which I don't think is typically industry, but it is still research organization and stuff. So what do you think about that? So will PhD narrow somebody's scope of employment, or they should still pursue that, or in your opinion, or in the industry there is still a lot of demand for PhDs and stuff like that?
I think it depends on the organization and the institution in general, but I think if you are considering pursuing a PhD, I think you do have to have a very specific goal in mind, career-wise. Okay. For me, it was pursuing a career at a national laboratory. I'd gotten some experience working at that institution and seen the value of having, a PhD and expertise in these areas and being able to work in an interdisciplinary setting. I think having a PhD really enables you to do that. There's really no way that you could get the on-the-job training to be able to do some of these things. Mm-hmm. So in some ways, if that's your goal, setting that goal for yourself, a PhD is the right course of action. Obviously, an academic job is a requirement. But also, even beyond that setting in the industry, consulting work, a lot of consulting work involves having very detailed knowledge in specific areas that I think can only be done unless you have a PhD. Okay. If you're an expert witness, obviously, you're going to have a lot more credibility with a PhD. And then, if you're trying to start your own company even, private enterprise, I think, having a PhD is going to be essential for you to gain, the business capital that you need to actually start the business and gain investor confidence.
Yeah, the term it's being used these days is called career capital, like how much career capital you are gaining and stuff like that. And that's a topic that fascinates me. So the last question, or second last question I have for you is, it's a little bit philosophical, but grad students often find it difficult to find a good work-life balance. Like, because it's not a structured thing, it's not an 8 to 5 job, it's a problem. A lot of times we are banging our heads against the wall because the problem is very tough, it's not solving and stuff like that. And before you know, you are in front of a computer or in the lab from 8 o'clock in the morning till 9 p.m. at night, and then you get frustrated and you're like, oh, I don't have a work-life balance and stuff like that. What kind of suggestion would you give? How do we find a good thing so that it actually stays fun while at the same time we're doing cutting edge and productive research?
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple things that I think you can do, and I would recommend students do this. One of the things that I did when I was in graduate school was I formed a community with the other students in my cohort. Having that kind of support group of students who you can kind of feel a sense of social fulfillment with is incredibly important. Besides also establishing this expanded network and, developing yourself professionally through interactions with other students, learning from them and then learning from you, I think is valuable, not just from the professional perspective, but also very sustaining from the social point of view, and also having a measure of, where are the other people in your peer group at? How are you doing in comparison to them? Yeah. So that's one thing I would really recommend, establish a peer group, fulfill your social, needs in that setting. But I think the other component of it, you really have to have the passion for the work, and, keeping it fun is really a matter of, finding the joy in what you're doing. And I think, pursue your work with as much passion as you can find in it. Don't over-focus on the things that are fun. Sometimes you do have to work through the challenges, but if it's something that you feel that you're not passionate about, it might mean that you're pushing in the wrong direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it really resonates with me what you said about the peer group, because it's very important to realize that you're not alone in the journey. There are others on the other side of the wall who are also banging their heads and stuff.
Yeah. You can commiserate.
Yeah. It's like partners in misery or something. Right?
Yeah. I mean, but I think in the process of going through that, some of the best friendships I've had have come out the other side of it, in part because you feel like you've gone through this experience with, a shared group of people. Yeah.
Excellent. So now that brings us to the last question. It's a very open-ended question. So before going, do you have any advice for our current students, prospective students, or graduate students in general? I think you said a couple of things in the previous question as well, but to conclude, what do you want to say?
I think, this is maybe a piece of advice. I can't claim credit for this. This is something that I think was a piece of advice that was given to me during my undergraduate commencement ceremony. But it stuck with me, and it really guided me through my personal educational experience that came after that in graduate school. The speaker asked a general question. They said something like, what is your most valuable asset? It was a very generic question. And, I think the natural tendency is to think of monetary things, like your car or your home or your investments, or you might also be tempted to think of things like your accomplishments or your work products or the things that you produce. But I think the argument that the speaker had was that it's none of those things. It's you. You are your most valuable asset. Yeah. And really the best way that you can increase your own personal value is through education. Develop your expertise, invest in yourself, basically, was the commentary. And I think that was really motivating for me to see, it takes a while. You do have to, spend some time learning, and you might not necessarily be, putting out as much product as you would like to do or making as much money as you would like initially. But once you've developed that expertise, once you've invested that initial time and capital into your own personal development, it pays dividends in the long run. It's really, education is probably the most important thing you can do to invest in your personal value.
Excellent. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Brian, for your time. And this brings us to the conclusion of our first interview in this series. I really appreciate you joining us. And so the take home point from this one is invest in yourself. Go Pokes.